This week we are looking at composition. Now, composition is something that you need to bear in mind also at the end of your painting process. That is with regard to how you are going to mount and display your painting. But you need to go back to the beginning when you're planning it. As I often say to people, start with the end in mind. How do you want it to look at the end of the day? But first of all, let's look at a definition. If we talk about perspective, which we have looked at, and it's a bit of a thorny subject for some people, but all it means is a viewpoint, where you're standing when you look at the view. You'll hear people talking in an argument or a discussion. Well, let's look at it from this perspective. Change your viewpoint, change how you are looking at it. And composition is very similar with its definition. The act of putting together or making up by combining parts. Something formed in this manner, the parts of which something is composed, constitution. So you hear about a composition of music, it's how the notes are put together. A composition of words in a novel, it's how they are put together. And it's the same with your painting. So I'm going to show you a few examples and explain what I think the viewer has done to create the composition. But first let's start off with this, which has dried out rather lovely. Now, okay, for some reason or other, I don't know why, I bunged it in the middle. A lot of us do that, and I think it's probably how we are first taught in early school days of putting things, placing things in the middle, that sort of stuff. But with this, you might, for example, this is starting at the mounting stage, the framing stage. You might say, well, actually, I don't want to see any of this at the bottom, so we could crop it up there. I don't want to see any of that at the top, so we could crop it there and start covering it there. And maybe I find that all very interesting there, but not so much that. And you can start to play around with things. Now, this is exactly the same when you are starting off. You know what it's like when you take a photograph when you're first learning. You've got one person standing in the middle somewhere, and they're tiny because you don't really know what you're doing. And it's the same with this, isn't it? What I always say to people when they're planning their composition is to ask yourself the question, what is it that is most important in that you want to do a painting? Okay. For example, I went to Provence a few years ago to take pictures and look and enjoy the lavender fields, which are amazing. But when you see loads and loads and loads of fields, it really doesn't mean anything, does it? But I took a few pictures, and some of you will have seen this. I was very interested in this tree, this dead old tree, but it gives form to the composition of what you're seeing, and it's like a focal point. Okay, it could be a person standing there, but it's what I found the most interesting. I liked these flower heads here, then this bright green, and then of course you've got the perspective lines formed by the lavender field, the way it's been planted. Now, if you zoom into that, and this is what you are doing quite often with your composition, you're saying, well, I don't need all that there. So if I zoom in other words, if you crop off and focus on what you really want, then that makes it more interesting. I suppose, let's just play around with this while it's here. I could have taken the crop further. I could have taken it down. I could have gone up. You know, I wanted to show the big sky, but I wanted that dead tree. So I wanted to keep the shape of the dead tree. So let's not crop it off, you know, too far. And this is all it is about. It's not as complicated as you think. If you're using your camera, whatever your phone, to take photographs, before you press the button, just look and think, okay, why am I taking this picture? It's to remind me of a trip, an event, whatever it is. So what's most important about the trip or the event? Maybe it was those people standing there, in which case zoom in on them a bit more. Or it was that particular tree or that fountain, then you might want to zoom in on that. But it's also worth bearing in mind when you do that. I could have plonked that in the middle of my picture, but I didn't, because it has more power and more interest of being on the side. This is the other thing. It's like I just said about the poppies. For some reason, I started off and plonked them in the middle. Okay, that's okay, because I know if I get to framing this, I can fiddle about with the framing to accentuate the composition. So lose that, it's not important if you think. And this is exactly what you're doing at the beginning. So here I place the tree to the left because I rather like the way that gives you a line, like a border almost to the photograph, and then that intrudes into the landscape, which is also quite interesting. So that is a beginning look at composition. Now I'm going to move on to this book. It's a very old book. I bought it when I was there, and when was that? I don't know, but the book was printed in 1987, but I expect, looking at some of the photographs, they are a great deal older. Anyway, here's one I had a look at and thought it might be a useful example. So what are they taking here? Well, there's two people down there, bless them. They're taking this, aren't they? With the gold cupolas in the back. Now, they've got quite a nice, attractive piece of drain pipe here. If you were painting it, you would probably not bother with that. Okay, but this brickwork is interesting. This decorative column there. This one, I'm not so sure. Now, how would it be? Also, it's not actually vertical, I don't think. How would it be? Okay, bearing in mind this is too skinny now, but if they had taken that column out the way and not bothered with it, because it sort of tunnels a little bit, doesn't it? Let's have a look at something else. Ah, this is an interesting one. The Basilica in Red Square. Red Square really is very big if you have been there. It's enormous. Now, why did I take this out? Well, they're showing the depth of Red Square, look, by having this row of cars, having that row of cars, and having the people. If you look at them in proportion to, you get an idea of the vastness. But I am wondering if it might have made a more pleasing composition if you'd got rid of those cars there and possibly those new buildings there, and even gone across. Do you see what I mean? Not having that slap bang in the middle. It is only my perspective, but it's just to show you what's happening. Here's another one. Now this is quite pleasing here, because they're giving you the depth of that bit of grass there, and the beautiful trees and the building and the fountains at the end. This one is equally lovely, though you could ask the question again, how would it have been if you'd cropped that tree and let the tree be your boundary and possibly taken that up there, which would be losing that tree's shadow. But I think that might have made a more interesting composition. What do you think? it is a question of arranging things to suit yourself. As the definition in the dictionary said, it's taking parts and putting them together. It's like I just said earlier about that drain pipe. Get rid of the drain pipe. You don't want it. It's not pertinent to what you're doing. I mean, what you're doing is you are getting a message across. Now that's quite nice the way they've gone through the archway. Let's see if there are any others. This is lovely because they've got the reflection there, and they are giving you a feeling of the scale, the big sky, the scale of the building. So it really is a question of, when you're looking at something, decide what your motivation is for being there in the first place, or thinking about why you're taking the photograph, and what's most important that you want to bring out in the photograph and consequently in the painting. I've often said to people, look, if it doesn't actually work in reality, move that building a bit. Nobody is going to know. Nobody's going to pull you up for it. It's your work. It's your composition. And the fact that you've been prompted to go as far as taking a picture and thinking about it and thus do a painting, it's nobody's business but your own. Let's just see if there's anything else I might have missed. Ah, this is an interesting one. So what they wanted to get across here is the grandeur of this table. Oh, look how important we are. We've got all these chairs here. And you've got to think about the narrative, the story that you have in mind when you are doing it. This is rather interesting. I wonder if I might have cropped in a bit there. Maybe I would. I might, excuse me. Oh, full of sneezes today. Must be the weather. Excuse me again. Actually, I rather like that cropped in, because then you are focusing on what I think is probably the most important thing. This desk that has probably had some very important historical documents signed at it. Treaties agreed, who knows? Look, there's a map on the wall. Would you want to get rid of the light and bring that down? I don't know. I'm asking you these questions because I'm asking you to think more about why you are doing it, what's your motivation, and what's most important. So what I would like you to do, my dear friends, for your homework is to just get a few photographs, photos out of newspapers, magazines, anything that has caught your eye, or do an example of a composition from something that you want to do for your painting. Now, I hope that has put composition into some sort of composition for you, that you understand a bit more of what it means and how you can make your composition look more. It wants to be eye-catching. This is what you're aiming for when you do your composition. Anybody can do a little person in the middle with the fields around them, but if you focus in on that person and get more of a story behind it, then that will catch the viewer's eyes so much more. So I hope that's helped, and I will look forward to chatting about this demonstration with you, and also to see your work afterwards. Thank you very much.